So hello everyone. How have you been? All good? Apart from everything is okay. All right. And so let's start. Let's start first of all with setting our intention for today. Setting our intention with refuge and bodhicitta. And so, as I said, I think I said previously, um, whatever practice we do, when it is underpinned by going for refuge, it becomes a Buddhist practice that contributes to our own liberation, to our own enlightenment, particularly from a Mahayana perspective. If we, on top of going for refuge, if we motivate ourselves with bodhicitta, thinking that I am going to do that so that I will become enlightened, hopefully soon enough, then whatever we do becomes a Mahayana practice, creating causes for our own enlightenment. And so even this discussion, not only listening to the teachings, but also discussing it amongst us, when we think about it, motivated by refuge and bodhicitta, it contributes to our own liberation and enlightenment. And so that's why we start our session in this way. So let's just take a few seconds to calm our mind and to collect our thoughts. And quickly scanning our body, making sure that there is no discomfort or tension in our body. A relaxed and comfortable body supports a relaxed and comfortable mind. And what I do normally in my meditations or practices is I start with a round of 21 breaths, breathing in and breathing out as a way of anchoring my mind. And with each breath that I take, I invite a greater degree of relaxation, but also make sure that my mind is grounded. So let's do that for 21 breaths. And so, in thinking at the beginning of our session that we would like as much as possible to develop our mind, to acquire perfect qualities, and to remove everything that limits our mind. To begin with, to remove a narrow state of mind, disturbing, agitating, uncomfortable, unpeaceful states of mind that not only disturb our own mind, but it causes us to act in a way that is detrimental to others. The actions that we create keep us in the cycle of existence from life after life after life, ensuring that we encounter suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and pervasive suffering from life after life after life. And so to break the chain of karma and afflictions that keep us in cyclic existence, we turn to the teacher, the Buddha, the Dhamma that was taught by the Buddha through his enlightened mind. The Buddha's enlightened mind is an actual Dhamma, the actual Dhamma. Consummate qualities and consummate abandonments of all limitations. And over the years, over the centuries, countless bodhisattvas have taken up the load of practicing and reaching enlightenment for our sake, all the way to the current day, where we have many spiritual teachers that lead us on the steps to enlightenment. For us, they are Sangha, demonstrating, showing an example of practicing ethics and concentration and wisdom. And so mentally relying upon them is the nature of refuge, the essence of refuge. Think that I trust the Buddha, I trust the Dhamma, I trust the Sangha. And my true refuge will be the Buddha that I will become, free from all limitations. The Buddha, the Dhamma that I will embody, having a mind that is perfect, with no limitation, perfect qualities. The Sangha that I will become, that will be able to teach others. So thinking of also a compassionate motivation in relying upon the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Sangha that we will become in the future. The only reason to do that would be to free others from suffering. Myriad living beings that are undergoing various physical and mental suffering, various limitations. For their sake, I will attain the state of Buddhahood. And so we think, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. But the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. But the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. But the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. All right. So, thank you very much for joining in. I am wondering who is hosting the session today. Shella, is it you? Michael. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Michael, could you and can you you did it.
Done.
Thank you very much. All right. And so in the previous session, we started to look at the Buddhist teachings in one verse, and the one verse embodies, encompasses the teachings of the Buddha given in the three turnings of the wheel. So it is said that the Buddha taught 84,000 discourses, and the Buddha taught them because we have 84,000 afflictions that run through our mind, that operate through our minds, not only as human beings, but also, I guess, that there are so many different realms of existence, and specific afflictions which are specific to those realms of existence. Currently, they might not be operating in our own body, in our own existence as human beings and so forth, but I suppose that they could operate in other realms of existence. So altogether, we have 84,000 afflictions. All of them need to be eliminated in order to, first of all, become liberated for samsara, but also to remove all limitations that we have in terms of our knowledge. And so the Buddha taught those teachings, 84,000 discourses in the three turnings of the wheel, 3 periods, I think that the Buddha taught for 41 years after attaining the state of enlightenment, if I'm not mistaken. 41 years, maybe 36, I can't remember. Don't have that at the tip of my fingers. But anyway, um, and so thinking of a few decades of teachings, those teachings were divided into three periods: the first, the second, the third turnings of the wheel. And so all of those teachings can be summarized into this verse: commit no negative action, perform perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teachings of the Buddha. And so in the previous encounter session that we had, let's look at that. We spoke of the four truths as the basis for discussion, speaking of true suffering, and the common presentation was of the threefold suffering, suffering, and so forth. We spoke of true origins, true cessations, and true paths. These teachings were given in the first turning of the wheel, and all the teachings that the Buddha gave after that, all of them come under the great banner of the Four Truths. They are extension of the Four Truths. So then, the reason for subduing a mind, I said, is because happiness and suffering arise from the mind. Then, in order to subdue a mind, we follow a process that has those six stages. First of all, the first stage is knowing or understanding our minds, knowing what the mind is. This is what we're going to look at today. We're going to hopefully also look at the second, maybe start with the third stage of avoiding encounters with objects that fuel our afflictions, taking up ethics, commit no negative action, perform perfect virtuous actions, as the first two lines in this verse say. And then applying local antidotes to the afflictions, cultivating the concentration of shamatha, and developing wisdom, mainly the wisdom of emptiness, are the stages for subduing a mind. And so today I wanted to speak more of the first point, which is knowing our mind, how we develop a better understanding of our mind, is the first stage. Now, we have other presentations that lead us through the steps of enlightenment. So this presentation is not different to, for example, the Lamrim presentation. So the Lamrim presentation, the presentation of the steps of the path, speaks of, first of all, subduing a mind through the steps of the path, of which are shared with those of the small scope, then those which are shared with those of the great scope, and then those states of the path which are particularly the states of the path of bodhisattvas or mahayanis, the states of the mind of the states of the path of those of the great scope. And so these presentations are not contrary or not given in different orders. I think that when I think about it, they're just different perspectives on how we subdue our mind. And if we can think about them and then combine them together, I think that in our personal practice, maybe it would make more sense. So how are we doing so far? All good? I have morning coffee. It's morning here in Australia, so everything is okay with a cup of coffee. Okay. And so, first off, understanding a mind. And so, understanding what mind is, I thought of different points. The mind, of course, is vast and extensive. Actually, before we look at that, I think that it's easy for us to understand physical phenomena in the outside world. We have chemistry and biology and physics, the different sciences that explain very clearly, in a way that is more detailed than what we find in Buddhist scripture, that explain the outside world. Understanding what mind is somewhat more complicated because, first off, mind is not physical. Mind is connected with the operation of the body, with the operation of the brain. But when we start to look into it and ask ourselves whether it is a product of the brain, whether it is an entity that currently depends on the brain, but can also function, you can say, independently from the brain, then we run into more complications in the sense that it's really difficult to understand the way that the mind is, because we're dealing with something that is not tangible, but something that we experience. So here we have two levels, I think. First off, in understanding what the mind is, we gather knowledge. We gather knowledge through scriptures that understand the functioning of the mind. But becoming knowledgeable of what mind is not enough. Then we need also to match it up with a personal experience. We need to match it up with a personal experience because there are also different levels of the working of the minds. There are coarse levels and subtle levels. We understand different states of mind that we go through, particularly coarse states of mind. Anger arises, anger and attachment and jealousy and pride and so forth, but also positive states of mind, love and affection and a sense of closeness, a sense of meaning to our life, satisfaction. So these are often core states of mind. And we can not only understand the definitions as they are provided in philosophical texts, but we know them based upon a personal experience. So we can understand that. But also then when we look at more subtle description of the mind, of our consciousness, it is said um, in our presentation of awareness and knowers, or in Tibetan Lorig. Maybe some of you have studied this presentation. It is taught within the Discovering Buddhism and also basic program, spiritual programs of the FPMT. So the definition of consciousness taken from, I think that it is Purbuchok's presentation. The definition of Purbuchok is that which is clear and knowing. That's the definition of consciousness. And for the sake of our discussion, let's say that consciousness and mind here for this discussion mean the same thing. When you look at that in more specific presentation, we do distinguish between main mind and mental factors. But here, for the sake of our discussion, let's say that mind or consciousness, that which is clear and knowing. And so it's very vague, isn't it? We can understand the word clear and we can understand the word knowing, but what the meaning is of clear and knowing is pretty vague, pretty nebulous. So we have some philosophical explanation of what is clear and what is knowing, and we can also go to a certain distance with those definitions, but for me, it's not enough. For me, it's not enough in the sense that it is said that, for example, that which is knowing, so consciousness is an entity which knows. And so I understand that my consciousness understands or knows things, but actually, our consciousness also has wrong states of mind. We often speak about wrong consciousnesses. So, what is the thing that anger knows? Anger is a consciousness, so what does it know? Ignorance is a consciousness, so what does it know? Attachment and jealousy and pride, all of them are consciousnesses. So, the question is, what do those consciousnesses know? So, there is a philosophical debate or explanation and discussion, the discourse of what all consciousnesses know. And then there's a sense of clarity, being able to reflect objects. Something appears to the mind, and through what appears to the mind knows its object. So going back to this definition, that which is clear and knowing is the definition of consciousness. So we can go through a certain distance with that understanding, but then we start a practice. We take it on into a practice, and particularly in the Mahamudra tradition, the tradition that is based on researching reality through understanding the workings of the mind, we sit in prolonged sessions, maybe not prolonged sessions of meditation, but a long period of meditation in which we can have many sessions in which we try to experience, to understand our experience of knowing and clarity. Something that is really difficult to describe in words. But then when we start to meditate on that, on the knowing aspect of the mind, and also how there's something that appears to the mind, and through that appearance, through that clarity, through that vividness, the mind comes to know its object, then we have more experiential understanding of that which is clear and knowing. And so I thought of maybe today we can also spend maybe 2 or 3 or 4 minutes in meditation in just trying to sense that clear and knowing. What do you want? Would you like to do it, or would you like to do it now? Would you like to do it at the end of the session? Let's try to do it now. Well, Michael, you're the boss. You're the moderator. You are lead us through your decisions, Michael.
We can do it now.
We can do it now. All right. That was very decisive. Okay. So let's just take a few seconds to relax our mind. And there's no um, complicated, intricate thing to do in this meditation other than just be and observe the mind and come to see the knowingness of the mind. It doesn't matter which object. You can focus on a particular thing. You can focus on the screen. You can focus on sounds. And of course, when you focus on the screen or sounds, you focus on them with your sense consciousnesses, but also there is the operation of the mental consciousness. Or we can just leave the mind in an objectless state in which whatever appears to the mind, even the mind itself, is what we focus on, and we try to sense the quality of knowing. So let's first of all relax our mind for a few seconds, and then focus on the knowing aspect of the mind. And for our experience, we can sense, we can see that there is a stream of consciousness, a stream of experience. It is not physical, and yet it is experienced. And in each moment of mind, of consciousness, there is knowing, knowing of something. And there is also clarity. Something is reflected. An object is reflected to the mind. And the mind knows the object through that reflection. And so again, thinking of the continuity of mind from one moment to the next, we can become aware of knowing and clarity, being present at every moment of consciousness. All right, so let's open our eyes and continue with our discussion. And so this just brief exercise is an exercise. It is a meditation that is useful to do in order to recognize, first of all, the continuity of mind, and that with each moment of mind, there is knowing. Even when the mind becomes distracted, when it moves away to other objects in a meditation or during the days, there's always this quality of knowing and also clarity. And reality is underpinned by whatever appears to our mind or whatever we know. Not only reality is underpinned by the mind, by the way that by our perception, we then, when ignorance, which is always present, kicks in, it is always present, so it doesn't kick in general, it's always there. It perceives reality to be completely outside of the mind. But then I think that over time, as we become more aware of the knowing and appearance aspects of the mind, we can see how reality is just what the mind makes of, just in a way that the mind knows reality, what the mind makes of reality. And so coming to know our mind, let's go back to that, understanding what mind is. And so we um, can understand in a philosophical way what the mind is, that which is clearly knowing, but also matching it up with our experience in our meditation. And then we start to discover in our meditation on the mind that reality is underpinned by our perceptions. But then we need to look further than that. Then we start to then distinguish between positive and negative states of mind. And I think that all of you have discussed that for a long time. Um, we speak about afflictive states of mind and positive states of mind. In general, how would you describe afflictive state of mind? Or let's say negative state of mind? If you try to put it in your own words, how would you say that? How do you express a negative state of mind?
For me, a negative state of mind would be a state of mind where I'm not happy or content, where I'm disturbed.
Mm,
Disturbed in some way. It could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be um, just, a range of those kinds of things, but where I'm just not feeling good.
yeah, that's good.
I,
Others?
I would say for me, it's when I'm not, control is the wrong word, but I never know a better word to use. When I'm not in control of what I'm doing, because I don't have to feel good. I may feel afflicted when I'm feeling good, and I don't have to feel good to not feel afflicted. For me.
Yeah.
So it's for me, it's when I'm not in control. And like I said, I'd love to know a better word because control really isn't the right word. But when my emotions are beyond my ability to reel them in.
I think that probably control also works here, Michael, in a sense that it's part of the um, it's part of our inability to control the mind. You know, I'm using the same word, but afflictions arise in our mind not from our own choice, not because we want to, but because we have no control. You know, so it's part and parcel of the whole package of negative states of mind. I mean, no one wants to be angry, I think. I would hope so. Um,
Sometimes being
and so
angry is
also,
okay or feels good.
um, I guess that anger, when someone gets angry, it feels they might feel more alive. But when I get angry in general, no, there's a difference between being upset about something and being angry. You can see something like you can see an injustice being done, something that is not right. It is wrong. It is harmful to oneself or harmful to others, and you can be rattled by it. It's actually good to be rattled about something because if we are not rattled about things, about injustice or harm, injury, and so forth, it is likely that we will not do something about the situation. But then the next step is to become angry. Often it's not the required step, but this is what happens to us because we have no control. Something rattles us, and we become angry and seeking to harm, to beat, to strike, to eliminate something that we feel that is unjust or unright. And so, um, some think that say that it is good to be angry because only when you're angry you can change reality, or you can fix something that is not right. But I think that we conflate being upset about something, being rattled about something, and being angry. I mean, we can be upset about something and then change it, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't want to turn into vegetables, which do not react emotionally. You know, we do want to have a positive um, reaction, which seeks to solve, to fix, to change a certain situation, but we don't have to get angry about it. Anyway, so when I think of negative emotions, I also think of, in general, things which are not beneficial to oneself, to me, they're not helping me, but also they're not helpful to others. Not only they're not beneficial, they're detrimental to myself and detrimental to others. And so when I think of what Lorna said and Michael said and what kind of my way of thinking about it, I think that we can combine all those different aspects into an understanding of what a negative state of mind is. And there is a more precise definition of afflictive states of mind that is found in Kartsön Yeshe Gyaltsen presentation of minds and mental factors, which some of you might be familiar with to a certain extent. And so we'll look at that in a second. But also, I think that the opposite of that, positive states of mind, are states of mind which are, first of all, which are comfortable, which are useful to myself, useful to others. They do not bring about future suffering, but they bring about future happiness. Similarly, if we go back to negative states of mind are those which will produce suffering for me here and hereafter, suffering for others as well. And so then going into more specifics when we spoke about afflictive states of mind, Kachin Yeshil Gyaltsen presentation of awareness and noise, and actually it's minds and mental factors, I'll correct that in a second, gives us the definition of affliction, and it's quite actually similar to what Lorna said. It says it is a phenomenon such that when it arises, the characteristics of being very unpeaceful arises, and due to its arising, the mental continuum arises as being very unpeaceful. So first of all, it gives a very, I wouldn't say dry definition, but it's a little bit technical. And then Kachin Gyaltsen summarizes it in saying that it is an awareness that causes the mental continuum to be very unpeaceful when it arises. And so, again, it's not from the Logic text, it's from the text of Mind and Mental Factors. I will correct that in a minute. But Going back to our meditation on the mind, we can not only recognize the knowing quality and the clarity quality, we can also recognize the unpeacefulness that arises when a certain affliction arises in our mind. And that sometimes just a recognition of how we react physically and mentally when a certain afflictive state of mind is present can be helpful in terms of reducing the efficacy of afflictive states of mind, the hold that they have over our mind. With anger, it's quite clear that when anger arises, our body is uncomfortable. I, I think that is clear to me. Is it also, what is your experience of emotions or states of mind like anger, resentment, hostility, sense of aggression? Do you feel that in your body that it's uncomfortable? Um, Not only uncomfortable, there's a sense of not being able to, there's no control of our body. It's becoming jittery. Sometimes we have to move, sometimes we have to react. We cannot sit still. But of course, it's a very uncomfortable mental sensation as well, mental experience. So with anger, it's quite clear. But what about attachment? Attachment is quite elusive, isn't it? It's quite sneaky. Because with attachment is that sense that it's going to help us. We develop desire for a particular thing that we think that's going to make me happy, and thereby the mind seeks it. Sometimes it is said actually in the text of minds and mental factors, if I remember clearly, it says that attachment is like a drop of oil that has seeped into a cloth that is very difficult to remove. So we all know that eating chips or eating greasy food, the moment something drips onto a white cloth or something, it's very difficult to remove that stain. And so similarly, also with attachment, it's very difficult for the mind to break away from the object that it desires. But also, it gives us that um, nice presentation, as if we're just going to get what our attachment wants, we're going to be happy. It's going to give us pleasure. It's going to give us happiness. It's going to give us protection. We're going to be comfortable. We're going to have long-lasting happiness. And of course, with objects of attachment, they do have that ability to give us some comfort or pleasure and so forth. There is pleasure that is caused by them, but the sense of yearning and craving and wanting and wishing is a type of thirst that sometimes it seems that even if you have an ocean of water in front of you, you're still going to remain thirsty. It's not always like that with all the degrees or all the types of attachments that we have, but with some of them, when attachment is always present and niggling and kind of telling us the story that we have to have that thing, that new thing, that thing that we always wanted, it's going to give us long-term happiness and satisfaction. So it also creates that thirst, which is an uncomfortable sensation, disquieting, discontented feeling. Lorna?
So just for clarification, so is attachment a mental state that generates feelings and thoughts and feelings like it, because you brought it up as an emotion, but it's to me attachment is like a place. you
Yeah.
know, that then I'm in this place and it generates all these different thoughts and feelings,
Mm.
but it's the context I'm in that generates it. And it was a meditation I had learned. I can't remember the teacher's name, but just around that to look at things like, when meditating and what's going on in the mind and I'm feeling let's say some anger or suspiciousness about somebody, and it's not me feeling it, the I, it's it's the attachment that's generating it. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
All right. And so in Tibetan language, we use the word nyomong to describe afflictions. Now, the word affliction in English, I think, is a good word, but it's also, it sounds sometimes to me a little bit technical. In English, we sometimes speak about emotions or disturbing emotions. So anger is definitely an emotion. Maybe jealousy is also an emotion. But then when we get to things like attachment, some forms of attachment are emotions, and some of them do not feel like a particularly emotive state. But also we have things like we have wrong views. Wrong views are not emotions in English, are they? They're views. They're distorted states of mind. Ignorance is not an emotion, but it is a distorted state of mind. So all of these are called in Buddhist language afflictive states of mind. Some of them are emotions, but some of them are not emotions. And so all of them are afflictive states of mind in that when they are present, this sense of unpeacefulness, a disturbance arises in our mind. So attachment is one of them. So attachment, when we think of attachment, there's this, it observes an object of desire, something that we wish. It's based on ignorance, and so it sees that as being perfect by its own right, by its own power. Through its own power, it is perfect, and thereby it seeks it, it wants it. So that wanting, I think, just in terms of our experience, when I think of kind of this sense of attachment that arises in my mind, there's a sense of seeking it, but with thirst that only if I find it, I'll be able to be happy. And so just like, I can give you an example. There was, I've been traveling for the last 18 months. And um, when I was last in at Kathmandu, a friend of mine made me a cup of coffee with a portable espresso machine. And so I was sitting then in the next session of teaching and just being preoccupied completely in this session of teachings with how I'm going to get that espresso machine, which is portable, and so I can take it with me. So that sense of, I was listening to the teachings, but at the back of my mind, it was like coffee, coffee, coffee. How do I get this coffee machine? How do I pack this coffee machine? What's the weight of that coffee machine? So this was that unpeacefulness that um, arose in my mind.
Being
And then I came back
distracted.
to
Yeah.
Totally. And then I came back to Australia. Back to Australia, and I started to visualize not only coffee, kind of making myself a cup of coffee, but also I like my coffee with milk or with oat milk or what have you. So it'd be nice to have hot milk and maybe froth milk. So how do I also pack a frothing device into my bag? And also, the whole discourse that was going through my mind. I started Googling, you know, the whole presentation. And then I ended up in my mind kind of listing down a jug and thermometer and kind of this frothing thing. And so there was this sense that if only I get that, and it can fit quite well next to my monk's begging bowl, maybe inside. So the sense of yearning and wanting, and also not being able to detach my mind, to kind of take my mind away from the object of desire. And so I think that I'm describing the process because I think that it's very similar to what you described, Lorna. So there's that sense of seeking something, an object that seems to have those wonderful qualities, happiness from in the object, this coffee machine, this frother, or what have you, is going to make this perfect coffee that exists from its own side. And thereby the mind is constantly busy with that mental process, with emotions, with thinking, with conceptions, making plans, having concerns, what if what it's going to be too heavy? What's if I'm not going to find ways to warm up my cup of milk and so on and so forth. This mental process that kicks in is a byproduct of attachment. So attachment is that state that is present within all those different types of plans and emotions and discursive consciousnesses um, and it's also uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable, not in a very agitating way, but it is clear that, when I think about it, that the mind cannot rest in a peaceful state, on a focused state. There's always something that kind of tells me that I'm dissatisfied. And so at some point, during the processes, as I was kind of looking for new devices for my perfect coffee pack, then I became aware of this is what's happening to me now in my mind. Again, there's that sense of that there's something out there that can give me long-term happiness and satisfaction. This is what attachment does. So, with coffee, it's quite simplistic. It is a simplistic.
But if you think, but I'm just wondering, just on that tact, if knowing that it's not gonna give you long-term happiness, but short-term satisfaction, is that okay? Like, is that not being diluted? Like, it's not, I know this isn't gonna make my life beautiful and wonderful, but boy, it would give me some serious satisfaction over the next 10 minutes, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's, I think that for us, we were born into this samsaric body, and I'm not renounced. For me, it's work in progress. So I haven't developed spontaneous renunciation. And so I still need some happiness and comfort in my life. And without that, I cannot go on and continue with doing what I'm doing. I mean, when I say I cannot, probably I can with it, but with a great degree of discomfort. And so I think that for me and for all of us is a question of give and take. What are the things that I can give up upon gradually to make my life more simple and also free some time, physical time, but also mental time, so that I can focus on things that for me are of greater priority, liberation and enlightenment. So it is work in progress, and over the years, I'm able to do it better and better. But there's still a long way to go now till I'm completely renounced. And up until then, up until that happens, if I can get some enjoyment, there's nothing wrong in that with that. But also, um, reducing the sense of satisfaction, the sense of attachment gives us a greater degree of freedom. And so for me, at least, when I just kind of recognize that this is what happens when attachment tells me that story, I'm able to put a stop and kind of to press the brake pedal and say that this is silly. I don't need a milk frother in my heavy suitcase. I can get away with without having that. Um, but it's a very simplistic, I think, example. But I think that one of them that, at least for me, if I become a bit personal about it, when I became a monk, and certain things that I had to give up as a monk, like, for example, intimate relationship, only then suddenly I started to recognize how attachment does have that thirst aspect that comes along with it. And it doesn't matter what you have in front of you, your thirst can never be quenched forever. This is what attachment does. And so it is an unpleasant state of mind where it is present in a very acute way. And it doesn't have to be attachment to intimate relationship. It can be attachment to money, to possession, to car, to this and that. It manifests in many different ways. And I think, as Lorna, as you said, it also sometimes have different levels of subtleties. And there's different story that goes in the background that is building up in a kind of whole emotional picture. Susan?
Yes, I think you answered part of this. Would you say that attachment is part of our human nature? We're born with it and it's instinctive because we have to be attached to others for survival. And so babies have to, they need their mother or they need a caretaker who's very close to them. And we rely on others through our life. We're social animals. And I don't mean the kind of attachment that's obsessive, like in a consumer society, to things or that imprisons other people. But some kind of attachment seems part of our natural makeup. Do you think, what do you think?
All right. I think that probably we can distinguish between different things. So, um, first of all, between wanting something and being attached to it. Not all desires, not all things, not all the things that we want, not all those wishes are necessarily attachments. So in order to clarify what the difference then is between wanting something and being attached to it, we can look at the definition of attachment. So it is said that attachment sees a desired thing as existing as desired by way of its own characteristics or by its own power, and thereby it seeks it. It's a little bit technical, I think. So when I unpack it, I go back to the beginning in looking at the way that ignorance operates in my mind, in all of our minds. And so ignorance sees reality as existing externally in a concrete way, in an independent way, in an objective way. Our happiness, ignorance is a happiness is existing in a concrete way outside of our mind, independently. And then attachment comes on top of this ignorance, and it emphasizes positive qualities. It exaggerates positive qualities. Not only there is an exaggeration of positive qualities, there is a denial of negative qualities. I think that it happens to all of us when we fall madly in love. Maybe not to all of us, but to me it did happen a few times. And also falling in love with a certain person and thinking that that person is so wonderful. And only if I have a relationship with that person, I'm going to be happy. There's no faults in that person, no faults whatsoever, only positive qualities. My brother is a serial marriage person. When I say serial, he did it only twice. Maybe there's not so serial aspect to that, but both of his marriages were. I hope that he's not listening to that. I'm quite sure that he's not listening to this discourse, so I'm kind of revealing some information about my brother. Anyway, his both marriages were after, I think, a few weeks or a few short months after he met his ex-wives. And all the process was with kind of discovering those wonderful qualities. And then when his marriages broke down, it was discovering all those horrible qualities to the point where there were no positive qualities. And so I think that it often happens to us, not only in relationship, but with other things as well, that we become attached to. There's like, first of all, ignorance that things exist objectively outside of my mind, and often they have those positive qualities, and then our mind emphasizes those qualities. It makes them amazing. No negative qualities, of course, no questions asked, only negative qualities. And thereby we seek it. And so then going back to your question, to the point that you made, Susan, is it innate within us? Well, I would say that it depends on what we understand by the word innate. Within the Buddhist tradition, we say that no afflictive state of mind is innate, in a sense that it's not ingrained within the nature of the mind. To be innate or ingrained within the nature of the mind, it means that you will never be able to separate your mind from attachment, for example. That attachment is a built-in mechanism within our mind. It has always been like that and will always be like that, and therefore there is no possibility of being free from attachment. So no affliction is ingrained within the nature of the mind. Attachment is not the nature of my mind, but indeed it is true, Susan, that it is present since time without beginning in our mental continuum throughout the various lifetimes that we've already lived. And we have such strong imprints for attachment that it only takes getting closer to an object of attachment and paying an incorrect mental attention to it, that those imprints are being activated and they bloom into a presentation of attachment. And so we become attached to others, we become attached to things because we have imprints. Without those imprints, without close proximity to objects, without an incorrect mental attention that we pay to things which superimpose, exaggerate the positive qualities, we will not become attached. So then what about relationships that we have with others? Like, for example, we're born to a mother, or when we have kids. There's a sense of closeness and bond that we have with a mother, with a father, with our children, and so forth. Are they necessarily attachments? I think that some of them, um, there is a sense of course, love and care that are present in those intimate relationships, and love and care are that we have to our close ones are the seeds of love and care that we can develop into great compassion. I mean, all of us have, you can say that all of us have seeds of love and compassion because all of us have been parents before. If not in this life, we were parents in previous lifetime. And we had that sense of perfect love or perfect caring, which we thought that if I could only give my child happiness and protect them, if I could take away the sickness, the pain, the confusion that they have, I would do it gladly in order for them to be free. Those are the seeds of love and compassion that we have within us, that we've accumulated in previous lifetime, and we've also accumulated them in this lifetime. These are the seeds of unbiased love and compassion that can be developed in the future. It is true that sometimes they become mixed up with attachment. And so there's a sense of, first of all, love and care that we have to our child or to our parents or to sibling, friend, parents, what have you. And then they become mixed up with attachment. Often the thing that with attachment that there's no way that we could be happy without them. When they go away, when they are not around us, if something terrible happens and they pass away, then there's no way that we can become happy. So in those situations, attachment and love or compassion get mixed up. And there's nothing drastic that we can do now in order to separate between them, but we can start to pay attention to the working of attachment, and try to reduce attachment and to increase this natural sense of love and compassion that we have to others. It is indeed part of the makeup of our society as species. You can say that we live in communities, we live in societies, we have a family relationship that, with our biological process, we do need to depend upon our parents in order to grow up, in order to survive. And so, of course, love and care are part of the mechanism. So it is there in a raw form, but then often attachment gets involved with that, and with a sense of without them, we cannot be happy. And so the opposite of attachment is not detachment, I think. It's not a sense of stopping to care about others. So in that process of understanding how there's a sense of love and care that we have between ourselves and others, and it is necessary for our survival and our development and our flourishing as human being, this is necessary. But when we understand how attachment works, we can also then recognize that at some point separation will happen, will come to pass. Old age, sickness, death, breaking down of relationship, separation between people happens because this is the nature of our existence, impermanence. And that is one way that we can think of in order to reduce the sense of attachment that we have. With a lesser sense of attachment, we can love others in a way that is greater, to have a genuine sense of care for others, not to care for them because they make us happy, but to care for them because they want to be happy and they're seeking to be free from suffering, just like us. Also, there are other ways, other things that we can do in order to reduce the sense of attachment that we have to others. So thinking of, for example, what the nature of attachment is, the superimposition, the exaggeration of positive qualities, and thereby seeking it, That's one thing, just the recognition of that. Second thing is to think of the impermanence of the object of attachment. The third thing is to think of the impermanence of ourselves. We're growing older, we're aging, we're becoming sick, we will die at the end. And so separation will inevitably come, either because of ourselves or because of others, or because of the two, ourselves and others. But also to think of, on top of that, to think of the wisdom of emptiness, in that the object of attachment a mind presents a certain display as if they exist in and of themselves from their own right, objectively outside of the mind. But when we look for the objects of attachment and try to find them, those wonderful things within the whole package that appears to our mind as existing external to the mind, we cannot find them in this way. Things do not exist in the way that they appear to the mind. So through thinking about it over and over again, the power of attachment is gradually reduced. And when I say gradually reduced, I think that we have to go through a constant long-term process of thinking about it over and over again. We have a great explanation of antidotes, and we will speak about antidotes in our, I guess, previous session. Different antidotes to afflictive states of mind, but it's not like a one-off thing that we do. It's like when you get angry, for example, you can think of love, you can think of compassion, you can think of patience. When you become attached, you can think of the unattractive aspects of the objects that you're attached to. That's another method for working with attachment. But doing it as a one-off thing is not, I think, at least for me, powerful enough to reduce the power, the efficacy of my afflictive states of mind. I have to do it over and over and over again, and to get used to the power of the antidotes in order to reduce the heat of afflictive states of mind. And so I said quite a few things, I think, so far, Susan, in relation to your question. Are the things which are neglected? Or to begin with, is it clear?
I think it's very clear. Yes, thank you. The main thing is things do not exist the way they appear to the mind. I mean, it kind of comes down in some way, it comes down to that. But yes, thank you. That was a very clear explanation.
Thank you. And so we spoke about what are positive states of mind, what are negative states of mind, what are afflictive states of mind. Then also, I spoke about how does it feel when afflictions arise in my mind? How does it feel physically? How does it feel mentally? Are we comfortable? Are we not comfortable? And of course, how do I act? How do I act when afflictions arise? I mean, often when afflictions arise, too often we behave in a way that is unhelpful, in a way that is detrimental to ourselves, and often also in a way that is detrimental to others. And that links up with the presentation of true origins within the Four Truths. Karma and afflictions are the origins of suffering in cyclic existence. So understanding what the mind is the first step in the steps of subduing the mind. All those different things, what the mind is, what are afflictive states of mind, but also in the same vein, we can also understand what are positive states of mind, also to observe not only love and compassion and patience and generosity, but also to observe the way that they feel, the texture of those afflictive states of mind. Are they pleasant physically? Are they pleasant mentally? This is also part of knowing our minds. And just sometimes, as I said, a mere recognition of, calling an affliction by its name. Anger is present, pride is present, jealousy is present, has some power in reducing the heat of the afflictions. This is the first step. And when I said, by the way, the first step, this process, I describe this process as a gradual process, but often it is, we have to do it over and over again in cycles, going back one step or two steps to the back, and then again progressing and then going back and then progressing. So it's not just like a process in which we will never go back. Anyway, the next step is avoiding encounters with objects that fuel our afflictions. And so Vasubandhu, a great Indian master, wrote a text that is called the Abhidhamma Kosha. And in the Abhidhamma Kosha, it says that looking at the things that give rise to our afflictions, there are two factors which trigger our afflictions. The first one is being in close proximity to objects that trigger our afflictions. The second condition is paying an incorrect mental attention to those objects. And so thinking about, for example, someone that is irritating you, causing you either, making you completely enraged or a bit uncomfortable, a bit nauseating. You flinch when you think about a certain person, either when you see them, when you hear the name, or when you think of that person. So in that sense, you have close proximity to an object of affliction. That's the first condition. And the second condition is paying an incorrect mental attention to that object. And that incorrect mental attention is the process of exaggerating negative qualities in the case of anger. And so when I think of someone that I had someone that I had that was fighting with in the past, someone that either I had a conflict with, I had an argument with, someone that disturbed my mind. So first of all, when I think of that person, when I see them in my rear vision or in front of me, when I hear them name, this sense of uncomfortable feeling that arises in my body and in my mind. And then this incorrect mental attention that exaggerate negative qualities kicks in. And the next step is anger or irritation, hostility, vengeance, or with attachment, coming across objects of attachment. There's something that is wonderful that gets our attention. And then incorrect mental attention is kicking in and is building that background story of how wonderful it would be if we could get that object because it has wonderful qualities existing out there by their own right. These are the two factors that Vasubandhu pointed out: close proximity and incorrect mental attention. And so with subduing the mind, if we find currently that a mind is reacts to certain objects, one possible path of action is to distance ourselves from the objects of our afflictive states of mind, of anger, attachment, and so forth. The word for monastery in Tibetan language is Gompa. And the meaning of Gompa is seclusion or isolation. That's one of the meanings of the word. So when you think of the kind of ideal location for monastic community, for a group of monks and nuns, it is in an isolated place in a way that is removed from the objects that would be challenging for ordained people. Not only challenging in the sense of attachment, but also in terms of keeping a schedule, a routine of study, reflection, and meditation. And then when you look at the process of cultivating calm abiding, shamatha meditation, it says that we need to create the conducive preconditions for mental stability, we need to develop mental isolation. First of all, physical isolation, but then mental isolation. So physical isolation, which is conducive for developing single pointedness of mind, is an isolation in which we are removed from objects that would otherwise trigger disturbing states of mind, attachment, anger, fear, and so forth. So when our mind is not subdued enough, it could be helpful. It is not always possible to remove ourselves from objects of afflictive states of mind. Like, for example, Shantideva says, I think it's in the chapter on patience. It says, where will you find enough? It's not patience, actually, it's the fourth chapter, I think. Chapter on conscientiousness. It says, where will I find, or maybe fifth, on vigilance. Anyway, chapter 4, 5 of 6, in one of those chapters, it says, where will I find enough leather to cover my feet? In the same way, where will I find something that will protect my mind from all afflictions? If I protect my mind, it will be tantamount to cover all the ground, all the earth with leather. And so in a sense that if I cover my feet, if I wear shoes, it will be like covering all the earth with leather. And so protecting a mind from afflictions can be done in different ways. But to begin with, if we cannot protect the mind very powerfully, it is helpful sometimes to remove ourselves from a situation. So for example, as an ordained person, it is not suitable for me, or it is not really helpful for me if I find myself in situations where my afflictions will be constantly triggered. So there are certain things that I know that are not helpful for me. I try to avoid them. When my mind is trained enough, it is subdued enough. If I go to those places, if I find myself in those situations, I will be able to have full control, no problem whatsoever. In fact, it is said that now when I think about it, for those of you who've read Dharmakirti's Will of Sharp Weapon, which is a wonderful text that teaches how to take upon yourself mind training, it is said that for bodhisattvas, finding themselves in situations where their afflictions are triggered is like finding themselves in a beautiful garden where you have beautiful food, beautiful flowers, beautiful things to work with, beautiful seeds. For me, for us, they are like poison. For bodhisattvas, there are things that add the colors and shapes and beauty to the practice. And so if our mind is strong enough, then finding ourselves in situations where our patience is triggered, it's wonderful. We can develop and enhance and grow a practice of patience. If we can develop non-attachment, find ourselves in situations where there were objects of attachment that were posed some problems for us before, and now we can see the beauty in things without becoming attached to them, that's wonderful. But if you find yourself in a difficult day, in a difficult period in your life, it's, I think, fair enough to say that for the time being, I cannot deal with that. I have to step back. And that's one step in subduing our mind, at least making sure that our mind is not kind of is not going into overgear. What do you reckon? Is that kind of, do you find that that's a valid, possible, sometimes necessary step for progressing? I mean, I have days in which, I know that there's some people that make it, that I find it difficult to deal with. Some days I go into conversations or working with them with a positive attitude, with love and care and so forth. And there are days in which I think, I don't think that I can do it today without getting too irritated. Maybe I should take a break for today. I think that's fair enough. All right. And so that's the second step, avoiding encounters with objects that fuel our afflictions. Let's see if I have something else. No, that's it. All right, let's look at the next step, which is taking up ethical discipline. So that's line 1 and 2 in this verse. So commit no negative action, perform perfect virtuous actions. And so to begin with, when we think of negative actions, commit no negative actions. There are things which the Buddha taught, which are called actions which are negative by nature, which means that whether you're Buddhist or not, whether you follow one tradition or another, or you follow no religion whatsoever, they're considered to be negative by nature. Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth, there are actions which are negative regardless of whether you're Buddhist or not, whether you have taken vows or not, whether you've gone for refuge or not. When you perform those actions, you accumulate negative karma. But there are actions also which are not negative by nature, but they're negative in certain circumstances. They are prescribed misdeeds. Like, for example, as a monk, I'm not allowed to drink alcohol. If I hang out with friends and I drink a glass of wine, a glass of beer, it's not an action that is negative by nature, but because I've promised not to do it, I've taken vow of ordination, they're calling this action is negative, and it is called prescribed misdeed. And it's the same for you guys, for lay people. And so if you haven't taken the refuge vow, if you've taken the refuge vow, but you've not committed yourself in certain, with certain teachers, you can take the refuge vow and commit yourself to go for refuge for the rest of your life. You made a vow that you will rely upon the Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha for the rest of your life. With some teachers, it is possible to do it without also promising to abstain from killing, stealing, and so forth. So let's say that you've done that. You've committed to go for refuge, but you haven't given up those 5 things, killing and so forth. If you drink a glass of wine, there's nothing wrong with that. You're not accumulating a negative action. If you have made a promise to abstain from alcohol and you drink a glass of wine, then you've acted in a negative way, you've created a negative action. There are things which are both negative actions and prescribed misdeeds. So, for example, for me as a monk, in my ordination vow, I also should abstain from killing, particularly killing another human being intentionally, murdering. So if I go about and murder someone, it's an action that is negative by nature, but it's also contravening my pledge, my commitment, my promise, and therefore it is also a prescribed misdeed. I get 2 for the price of 1. And therefore, breaking a vow is more serious than something that we do, a negative action that is negative, but not something that we promise not to do. Is it clear? All right. And so then we have, first of all, the distinction between prescribed misdeeds and negative things which are negative by nature. And then the Buddha taught the ethics that abstains from the 10 non-virtues as the basic ethical discipline that pertains to everyone that is Buddhist. It's not given the ethics that is in which we abstain from the 10 non-virtues. It is not given as a ethics as a separate vow that we can take upon ourselves. When we become Buddhist, when we take upon ourselves the refuge vow, for example, we need to abstain from the ethical discipline we need to take up ethics which abstains from the 10 non-virtues, regardless of whether we have taken a vow or not. And so within the 10 non-virtues, we have 3 of body, 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. I think that we all have had it before. So we have the abstention from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Then in terms of verbal actions, we have lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and meaningless chatter. Meaningless chatter means that being engaged in conversations that either fuel our own attachment, anger, and so forth, or that will also cause others to become attached, to become angry, to become jealous, to look down on others, and so forth. So this kind of speech or conversations. Then we have mental non-virtues, covetousness, ill will or malice, and wrong views. Those things are negative by nature. But then it's important also to think of the different components of actions as parts of things that we can use in order to subdue our mind. So when we take a course of action from within those 10 non-virtues, we can look at 3 components. First of all, the motivation. That's the preparation part, the motivation mainly. Then the performance of the action. And finally, the culmination, the conclusion of the action. It's important to recognize that because sometimes we act in a certain way. And if we can make sure the way that we act is negative, but if we make sure that some of those parts are missing, either the motivation is missing or motivation is actually quite weak, or maybe the performance is weak, or at the end we haven't culminated the action, we perform a negative action, but it's not as strong as it would have been had we made sure that all the components are present. And so, for example, killing. And this is, I think, probably something that you've had before, killing. You have the motivation to kill. You have not only the motivation to kill, you also come up with a game plan. How you're going to kind of see that person or that living being, what have you. You're going to meet them in a certain situation. You're going to take the life in this way or the other way. You came up with a plan. Then you have the actual performance. And at the end, you feel happy that you managed to carry out that assassination plan. If all of those parts of the action are complete, you have a strong negative action. If you had a thought about harming someone, but you didn't carry out that thought, that plan, then just in terms of the thought, you have created a negative action. There is certain negative habit that you've created in your mind, ill will towards another person. But without the performance, it is a secondary, you can say, or a downgraded action. Or you might have become angry at a certain person. You might have said something nasty, a verbal, use harsh speech. But at the end, you knew that that was not the right thing to do. You regretted it. So there's not the sense of satisfaction that comes up in your mind that you think that I got that person, I got them where they feel pain, I managed to say what I wanted to say. There's not that sense of satisfaction. There's a sense of regret for knowing that that was not the right thing to do. Particularly as Buddhist practitioner, that was definitely not the right thing to do. Again, the force of the action is downgraded. It's a weaker action. So in terms of subduing a mind, knowing those 3 components of the action, but also understanding what constitute negative actions in terms of 10 non-virtues is another step for subduing a mind. So commit no negative action. Currently, impossible for us. Our minds are still controlled by anger, attachment, and ignorance. And therefore, when we think of committing no negative action, it's impossible for us now. We are working towards committing no non-virtuous actions in understanding how the mind works. That's the first step. Controlling our motivations. Reducing the efficacy, the power of our afflictive states of mind when we know that they are present. Then, if we know that they are present, then at least trying not to act based upon them. So I'm meeting someone that I know that is always irritating me, always pushing the buttons. It's like when I think that the people that are closest to us are the people that push our buttons. My parents are both of them have passed away quite a few years ago, but growing up in the same household, it was almost impossible to avoid those kind of stepping into the shoes of being again the young boy, even when I was 40. and there were the parents. It's impossible to avoid those situations and impossible to avoid kind of this irritation that comes up in my mind. So being aware of the irritation, but also knowing that it is silly to respond to that in a way that I responded to them when I was a teenager or when I was 20 and so forth is silly, and it's also unnecessary. And also it's likely to be, sometimes it's likely to be maybe the last few years that I spent with my parents, or maybe the last time that I see my parents. So no, why should I spend not to resort to an argument or ill will or a kind of an unnecessary argument? I can just kind of let it go. So I don't take it up in terms of performance. And therefore, at the end, I do not regret what I said, but also I feel happy about being able to abstain from negative actions. So knowing those components of an action is helpful in subduing our mind. Currently, it's not subduing our mind thoroughly, but if we don't start with this, there would be no subduing of our mind thoroughly. All right. So there's more that I would like to say with respect to the third step, taking up ethics. And so first off, taking up ethics of abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, understanding the components of our actions and playing around with those components, making sure that some of them are missing, but also understanding the opposite of those 10 non-virtues. The opposite are the 10 virtues. So understanding what they are and deciding to act in a way that is deliberately avoiding the 10 non-virtues. On top of that, what I wanted to talk about, and I will do that in our next meeting, is speaking about taking up vows and also how we purify actions that we have done before. All of them, I think, are important components for subduing our mind. But we'll do that in our next session, speak about vows and purification. So any questions or things they wanted to bring up before we finish our session for today? All right.
Venerable, just one quick question, and that is the four elements of speech that are non-virtues: harsh speech, lying, divisive speech. What was the fourth one?
Idle chatter. So sometimes it is called gossip or meaningless chatter.
Okay.
And when you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of idle chatter, he says that speaking about affairs such as kings and kingdoms and wars and so forth, in general, there are things that trigger our afflictive states of mind. So, I think that in our culture, we don't speak about kings and kingdoms, but, the presidential debate was just a few days ago. It was pretty interesting. It's actually quite interesting. Now, for you, many of you are living in the US. So, Lorna, you live in Canada, as far as I understand. So you're Canadian, right? But it's interesting to see how, even from far away from Australia, I have so many friends that watch this debate. Not only watch this debate, it's also present in the conversations that we have after that, days after that. Pretty interesting. Anyway, speaking about politics, I guess that it's part of the non-virtues of speech, but I think that it has to be taken in a certain way. It has to be understood in a certain way. Of course, when we live in a world we are affected by politics, not only we are affected by politics, we are affecting politics. And politics is also a way of benefiting others. If we have benevolent, smart, enlightened leaders, which we don't, not only in the US, but I guess worldwide. So our participation in politics is necessary, I think, not on necessarily on a state level, but let's say family level, community level, of what have you, as part of benefiting others. But then sometimes we end up in a constant, never-ending political debate in which we are getting upset and people are getting upset without looking at how we can construct a conversation in a way that will bring about a beneficial resolution. And often also, quite often, we have no control. We are powerless in a certain situation. Like, for example, as individual, I as individual or you as individuals are probably incapable of fixing politics in the USA. We are a small part of the mechanism, but we don't have as individual the power to fix everything. So we can have a discussion with others. We can have discussions about what would be a useful way of looking at politics, having hopes for the future, a game plan that we come up with ourselves on how we'd be able to make things better. It's likely to take many lifetimes to make things better. So that could be a useful conversation. But to have an endless conversations in which we and others are getting again and again agitated and getting to a dead end of afflictions, that's idle chatter. But also Lama Tsongkhapa mentions even things like such as lamentation, sighing, and so forth, also as expression of some form of idle speech. So it's impossible for us to avoid that. So, we don't need to get too caught up, too uptight with thinking that we cannot avoid that whatsoever. We start with small things that we can avoid. And also, we live in communities. We have families. We go to work. We have to keep our social contacts with others. We cannot avoid any form of idle chatter. So what we do now is, at least I think what I try to do now is try to reduce and avoid situations in which I know that my afflictions are being enforced again and again. And also I help others create negative habits. If I can reduce that, that's a good start. All right. And so let's conclude our meeting for today with saying some prayers after the teachings. We're going to dedicate our merit for, first of all, for the development of bodhicitta in our own mind, so that we will be able to, in life after life after life, continue to develop bodhicitta, practice the perfection, so that we will flourish into our own state of Buddhahood for the sake of others, to be able to share the teachings with others, to help others in whatever way they can. And also, of course, we can dedicate our virtue for a functioning political system in the US and worldwide. I think that that's probably a contemporary topic. Also, let's say the dedication prayers. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta, that is not a reason, arise and grow. May that which is a reason not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And 2 verses for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the flourishing of his actions. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chinrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the Snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who makes extremely clear the path for this unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then we have a prayer for the long life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is no longer with us, but I think that we can say it, as I said it before, in thinking of may return to us quickly and continue to enact his wonderful actions for the sake of others. So in the last line, when it says, please, please live long, we can think, please, please come back quickly. You uphold the subduous moral way, you serve an bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Bhajana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers, honoring the 3 jewels. Several of myself and others, your disciples, please, please come back to us quickly. All right. So we're a little bit over time, 6 minutes. I apologize for stealing 6 precious minutes of your life. I hope that you have a restful end of the day and a wonderful beginning of next week. So thank you very much for joining in, and see you again next Sunday in
Thank
the
you
US.
so much.
Yes,
you.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.